Ah! Ah! Hello and welcome back to the Gen 10 Theater, and we're going to try part 2 of fitting the Disney canon into the expanded universe, and today we're going to talk about the TV shows. Now, I have a list here of the shows just because there was so much that it's hard to really keep up with. A quick mention in the front is all the web series. There was a lot of like children's web series that, even if it didn't contradict with something, it's not, most people don't even know they exist, and we're going to leave it at that. So the first thing is the Clone Wars TV show, and not the whole thing in itself, just season 7, because that was more of a recent Disney era animation project. And yeah, really, that one was fine, because it kind of just tied up loose ends with Ahsoka's character leading into Rebels, kind of showed another side of episode 3. Nothing all too serious, to be honest. In fact, it might have even enhanced the old timeline just a bit, which I quite enjoyed that season anyway. But that takes us into Rebels, where things start to change, because we have some characters that get in the way of the not only the expanded universe, but really the original trilogy. First and foremost, Ezra doesn't come back, clearly, because there was no Ezra in the original trilogy, and the character didn't even exist at the time of the expanded universe, so Ezra has to go away. And I know he disappears at the end of Rebels, but he has to stay gone. Don't know what happens. They could have explained it, but of course, they're not going to. They're going to do the new Disney version of, oh, here he is. But he has to go away. The other character that needs to go away, sadly, is Ahsoka. The whole world between worlds thing really ruins Star Wars as a whole, and it needs to have not have happened. She needs to have died, unfortunately, from Darth Vader. That way her character has an ending. Ezra needs to go away. And then other than that, I mean, it's just talking about what happened with the Rebels during the early formation years. It works out just fine. So that kind of takes us to a continuation of those shows with the Bad Batch. Now, so far, there hasn't really been any trouble with the Bad Batch fitting in. However, they're starting to talk about Mount Tantus. And the problem with that is it was a big part of the original Thrawn trilogy from the expanded universe. So as long as they don't start messing with it too much, there's really no problem with the Bad Batch either. Resistance, obviously gone, because that's all about the sequel trilogy. So that just gets the boot. Star Wars Visions, they don't even consider that canon now. So, could it fit in the expanded universe? Why not? There's no point of it not being there, because it's just random stories from random time periods. So, yeah, sure. It can be there. There's no reason why it's not. So now let's get into Tales of the Jedi. Now, unfortunately, this leads into two issues. The biggest one is in Tales of the Jedi, we see what happens to Yaddle. But in the expanded universe, we have a book for that. And that was, and I'm going to make sure I read it right here, it's Jedi Quest Part 6, The Shadow Trap, where Anakin and Obi-Wan and Yaddle go off to the planet of Mawan on a mission, and Yaddle sacrifices herself there on that planet. But in Tales of the Jedi, it's Dooku who fights Yaddle and defeats her. But at the same time, the book also conflicts with the Clone Wars, because it says that Gardula the Hutt is dead when she does appear in some of the Clone Wars episodes. So things are starting to get a little bit complicated, but they're going to be a lot more complicated once you start looking at The Mandalorian. The idea that just a Mandalorian happens to come in to do some bounty hunting and comes across a force-sensitive being, that in and of itself has no problems with the expanded universe. Luke coming out to save them still has no problems with the expanded universe. Where we start running into problems is, one, there's Ahsoka, and she needs to be dead. And two, Boba Fett. The whole story of Boba Fett, and even Book of Boba Fett, that whole plot line is not what happened in the expanded universe. We had multiple books covering that sort of stuff. For example, Boba Fett escaping from the Sarlacc pit was explained in a book called Tales from Jabba's Palace, and it's nothing like what happened in the Book of Boba Fett. Going forward, what he did after that was completely different as well. He returned back to his old life for quite some time before having a change of heart. And then in the end, the whole part about Bo-Katan taking over Mandalore again, that didn't happen either. Boba Fett was the one to take back Mandalore, and that happened in the New Jedi Order series when he fought against the Yuuzhan Vong. It really fleshed out his character a lot more and made it a little more believable than what we ended up with here in the TV shows, which was very weak and poorly written. Moving on, as we said before, the Ahsoka show is out the window, so we won't even touch on that. And that really leaves us with the Andor show, which, as I said in the first part, the things revolving around the Rogue One movie, they can be left alone and we won't have any issues. So I hope you enjoyed this part, and that leaves us with just the books for part 3. And there's a lot more to that, so I have a lot of work to do to make sure things don't overlap, and there's new books coming out just around the corner. So, I'll see you in that one.